Welcome to Psychic Insights, where pop culture meets higher consciousness and the tea is always a little bit mystical. I'm Robin Richardson, your psychic girlfriend, and around here we don't just watch the drama unfold. We read the energy behind it, whether it's celebrity scandals, reality TV, chaos, or true crime with a twist. I'm tuning in to bring you the intuitive scoop the headlines miss. So buckle up, because your aura's about to get entertained. There are moments in life when one emotional wound changes everything. One rejection, one heartbreak, one humiliation, one identity we attach ourselves to. And from that moment, entire timelines begin to unfold. For some people, they become wiser after pain. Others become consumed by it. Some choose healing, and others choose control. And today I want to explore a question that honestly fascinated me intuitively. What if Laura Owens chose differently? And not from a place of excusing behavior, and not from a place of avoiding accountability, but from a place of understanding potential, because I personally believe many versions of ourselves exist energetically at the same time. Different identities, different paths, different futures. One version of someone spirals deeper into obsession, another pauses and heals. One version becomes bitter, another becomes transformed. And I think there's absolutely a version of this story that ended very differently. I'm Robin Richardson, and this is Psychic Insights. I'm known as your psychic girlfriend, and welcome back to my channel. And if you like this kind of stuff, stick around for this episode because I think it's going to be interesting. And thank you for liking, subscribing, and supporting my work. Today's episode is honestly one of the most psychologically and spiritually fascinating episodes I've done in a while, because instead of asking who's guilty, who's lying, who's the villain, what the heck's going on with these people, I wanted to ask something deeper. What happens when someone's wounds become louder than their soul? And what happens if those wounds were actually healed instead of acted out? And I was recently asked, and thank you for sending in your questions, what if Laura Owens had come to you as a client? How would you have guided her? And honestly, that question stayed with me because real intuitive work should not deepen delusion. It should not feed obsession. It should not encourage emotional instability. It should not help people force outcomes. Of course, I would probably recommend professional therapy first. But let's talk about real spiritual work, because that helps people reconnect with truth, with personal accountability, with emotional awareness, with identity, with self-worth. So today, I pulled cards around one specific question. What if she chose healing instead of manipulation, empowerment instead of control, self-awareness instead of escalation? And the cards that came through were incredibly powerful. You know me, love my cards. What I pulled was moon, ship, dog, and then we had snake, woman, heart. You know where this is going, right? We got book, we got man, and we got path, garden. Okay, got garden, not path. All right, and so what emerged wasn't a story of a woman without potential. It was a story of someone standing between very different versions of herself. So before we even get into the cards, I want to explain something important and how I personally view manifestation, consciousness, and human behavior. I believe every major emotional crossroads creates branching identities. One version of us becomes hardened by pain and another becomes awakened because of it. One version spirals into victimhood, another rebuilds themselves. And one version stays emotionally attached to the wound, and another finally asks, what needs to heal inside me? And the version that becomes dominant is usually the version being fed by our choices, our nervous system, our self-awareness, our environment, our emotional patterns, and our willingness to confront truth. And that's why this reading fascinated me so much, because I don't think this was a destiny that had to unfold this way. I think another timeline existed. And when I looked at her astrology, and remember, I dabble, and I looked at her chart, I honestly see enormous emotional intensity and enormous potential. I don't see charts without gifts. I see a chart where unhealed wounds overtook the gifts. The Taurus energy especially stands out to me. Taurus wants security, stability, consistency, and safety. And remember, humiliation is a big problem for Tauruses. But in shadow, Taurus can become emotionally fixated, unable to let go, trying to hold on to people, outcomes, or identities long after the energy has naturally ended. And then we have Venus in Gemini. This placement can be incredibly intelligent. You've heard her be spoken about that. Charming, communicative, adaptable. But in shadow, it can create emotional fragmentation, narrative building, mental looping, wanting connection while also struggling with emotional grounding. And then there's Mars and Pisces. And honestly, this placement says so much to me energetically because Mars and Pisces often struggles with direct emotional confrontation. Instead of healthy, direct action, emotions can become indirect, confused, escalated internally, and projected externally. And when someone is deeply emotionally dysregulated, fantasy can begin replacing grounded reality. And that's the moon card energy too. And again, this does not make someone evil, but it absolutely shows how unresolved wounds can distort perception over time. And then we have her human design, because this is fascinating when you layer it in. Because as a projector with emotional authority, the core wound often revolves around recognition. Projectors are deeply sensitive people. When healthy, they guide beautifully. And you could see this. She wanted them to be a guide. They understand human behavior deeply. They're perceptive, insightful, and emotionally aware. But when wounded, the not-self theme of bitterness can become all-consuming, especially when someone feels unseen, rejected, discarded, emotionally invalidated. And you heard this in her emails. Projectors are not designed to force outcomes. They are designed to cultivate mastery and become magnetic through alignment and recognition. So when someone repeatedly tries to force recognition externally, instead of building emotional stability internally, bitterness can morph into fixation, resentment, obsession, emotional control dynamics, and retaliation. And honestly, that's why this episode makes me more sad than angry, because I see her potential. I see someone who could have become incredibly insightful and transformational if the wounds had become conscious earlier. Then we have the moon. We have the moon. We're going to do our cards, okay? We have the moon. And to me, this is the emotional root of everything. The moon represents projection, confusion, fear, emotional instability, fantasy, distorted perception, and unresolved subconscious wounds. And honestly, I don't think this spread chart starts with manipulation. I think it starts with emotional pain. And remember, there had been word that her father favored her sister. Okay? Some people don't experience rejection as this relationship just didn't work out. They experience rejection as I am unlovable. I'm being erased. I have no value unless I'm chosen. And that creates emotional panic. The nervous system starts trying to regain control externally because it cannot regulate internally. And that is the moon energy. And this is where the alternate timeline first appears, because the moon can either become illusion or self-awareness. Then we have the ship. And I immediately felt like there was another path available. The ship says movement, reinvention, leaving old emotional identities behind, choosing another direction. And this is where my belief in parallel realities becomes strong. Because I don't think transformation is becoming fake. I think it's aligning with another version of yourself that already existed as potential. There is absolutely a timeline where this woman walked away from obsession, got support, healed, reinvented herself, rebuilt her identity, and transformed emotionally. That version existed too. Then we have the dog. And this card hit me emotionally because the dog says safe people, healthy friendship, grounded support, loyalty, accountability, and honestly, I think wounded people often surround themselves with people who validate their pain. Think Jan, think her sister, instead of helping them heal. And there's a difference. Real support is not, yes, destroy everyone who hurt you. Real support says, I love you enough to help you come back to yourself. And this reading tells me she desperately needed grounded emotional support systems. Okay, then we have our friend, Snake. And Snake can absolutely represent manipulation, strategy, triangulation, and emotional control. But spiritually, the snake also represents transformation, healing, shedding skin. That's why it shows up in the medical symbol, right? But spiritually, I think the same emotional intelligence that became manipulation in one timeline could have become wisdom in another. Because energy itself is neutral. The same intensity that destroys in one reality can heal in another. And that's why I never see people as all good or all bad. I look at where consciousness is directing the energy. And then we have the woman and the heart together, okay? The need to be chosen. And honestly, this is where the reading absolutely became heartbreaking for me. Because beneath all the chaos, these cards say, this was ultimately about love, or at least the longing to be loved and feel loved. Chosen, wanted, significant, emotionally safe. And I think many people might be watching can relate to attaching their worth to whether someone chooses them. And that's human. But the danger comes when love becomes tied to survival. Because once someone believes if this person rejects me, I lose my value. And desperate people often make destructive choices because the emotional body can enter desperation. Okay. I don't know. How are you feeling so far? Comment in the comment section. All right. Then we have book. This is how I would have guided her. If she had come to me as a client, this is where the work would begin. Not with the man. And believe me, a lot of people come for two things. Am I getting paid or am I getting laid? Two major subjects, okay? A lot of people come to me for deeper things, and that's the kind of client I love working with. But we would work with the wound underneath the heart card. I would want to understand, why does this rejection feel catastrophic? Why does validation feel tied to identity? What emotional story is driving this behavior? And I would help her separate intuition from obsession, because those aren't the same things. And I think this is where spiritual work can either help someone heal or help someone spiral deeper into illusion. A good intuitive does not feed fantasy. A good intuitive helps people reconnect with truth. Sometimes people don't like that. Even the painful truth. Okay. All right, so we have the man in the garden. And this is a timeline that could have been. And honestly, this feels like the alternative timeline. Public respect, connection, purpose, community, healthy visibility. And I genuinely think there was a version of this woman who transformed her wounds into wisdom, who became known for growth instead of conflict, who used emotional intensity to help others instead of controlling outcomes. That timeline existed too. And maybe that's the deeper lesson in all of this, not just for her, but for all of us, because I truly believe every human being exists between multiple versions of themselves. The wounded version, the healed version, the bitter version, the awakened version. And that version that ultimately emerges is usually the one fed by awareness, healing, accountability, and emotional truth. Pain itself is not what destroys people. Unconscious pain does. And healing is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming aware enough to stop letting wounds drive your reality. And I do a lot of work with the Neville Goddard series, Joe Dispenza, Be Something Wonderful, Tom Caron. All of those resources helped me to understand manifestation better and to choose the reality that I want to experience and how I want to be in the world. So if this episode resonated with you, let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Do you believe different energetic timelines exist? Do you think people can radically change when they finally become conscious of their wounds? And if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after heartbreak, humiliation, rejection, betrayal, or emotional collapse, I hope this episode reminded you of something very important. Your pain is not your identity. And there's always another timeline available. So seek it, choose it. And if you need help with that, book a one-on-one session with me. I love you all. Thank you for your support. Like and subscribe, ring that bell, and I'll see you in the next one.